presentation is on the Jewish fight for abortion access. Shira Zemel and Glenn Northern are co-directors of the National Council of Jewish Women's Abortion Access Campaign, the coordinated Jewish movement for reproductive health, rights, and justice. In this role, Shira activates and mobilizes the Jewish community to act for abortion access. Shira has spent her career developing programs and campaigns that bring people together around a shared purpose and trains leaders to bring their Jewish values into the public square. Shira serves on the Arch Board, a local abortion fund serving patients seeking care in Northern Virginia. Shira enjoys curating feminist yard signs for her front lawn, listening to news and political podcasts, and working on craft projects, preferably with her 2 young children. Glenn brings more than 25 years of experience in the field of reproductive health, rights, and justice to NCJW, where he co-directs Jews for Abortion Access with a focus on partnerships and advocacy. Prior to joining NCJW, Glenn led faith-based advocacy efforts at Catholics for Choice as the domestic program director. At Planned Parenthood Federation of America, Glenn's work included outreach to communities of color and managing the Clergy Advocacy Board. Glenn enjoys singing a cappella with his friends, reading science fiction, poetry, knitting, and learning American Sign Language from his teenager who is studying it. Glenn is a graduate of Williams College, where he majored in political science and women's studies. Thank you, Glenn and Shira.
Thank you, Harriet. Thank you. Wow, I'm really honored to be here. And just so impressed with this lunch and learn, how organized this is, how delicious all the food was. Thank you so much for having us. We're gonna get this up and running.
Yeah, so we'll tell you, we are super excited to be here. Shira and I didn't know each other before we started our work here, before we started in our respective jobs, and we had circles and circles of mutual friends. So it was sort of a good sign as we sort of started the work together.
And I feel very at home at Temple Micah, where, so I was honored to be invited, and it's so nice to see faces I've known for my entire life and new faces to me. So thank you all so much. And thanks to our colleagues, Faith and Jane, for being here to support us. All right, so we're just gonna share a little bit about who we are and how we got into this work before we dive into the Jewish fight. So there's a few avenues or ways I guess I could describe how I came to land in this role. One thing I feel compelled to share with all of you is that, so I live in Falls Church, and in 2014, I moved into this nice neighborhood in Falls Church that is across the street on Route 29 from this old office building where I took driver's ed in high school. And it's next to a 7-Eleven where we always had a break during driver's ed, and that's the social time where you got to loiter outside the 7-Eleven. And so this building sticks out in my mind because I was about to be like a freed young person with a driver's license, and I had to go to this office building every week for many weeks to learn how to drive. And I don't know if there was an abortion clinic in that building at that time, but there certainly is now, the Falls Church Healthcare Center, which is an amazing independent clinic that is local to our community. And so when I moved into the neighborhood, I started to notice every single day there is anti-abortion protesters outside. Sometimes there's just a few of them, sometimes they take up the whole block. And right after I had Zev, who's now 5, I started sending him to a in-home daycare where I would have to pass the clinic every day on the way home from work to pick him up. And every day I'm seeing these protesters outside with these signs, and they often have, you know, words of scripture on their signs. And there's just so much hate on their signs and it's grotesque imagery. And I thought to myself, something here is really working. It's like I'm noticing them. Clearly, what's happening is on their side around me in the news. And in my own role, at the time when I was trying to help young Jewish people figure out how to bring their moral voice into the public square and their Jewish voice into the public square, I thought there's a lesson I can be learning from these people from who I think it's disgusting what they're doing, but it's absolutely their right to do it because they're bringing their deeply held beliefs into the public square, maybe in a way that's louder than I felt we should be. So that's one avenue how I got into this work.
Yeah, and for me, after college, I came and I moved down to DC because I wanted to do work in these issues. Oh,
Yeah.
use the microphone. When I moved down after college and I came down to DC, and I've sort of been doing this work for a really long time, but the most fascinating piece, I think, is the power of the faith community in this. I think the last 15 years of my own work in this, I've realized that one of the pieces that I think has been neglected, thank you. One of the pieces that really has been neglected are faith voices in this space. And I think I hold out the hope that a united Jewish community, a united other communities can really be the counter voice, the counterpart to the voices that are really a small minority that are speaking really loudly, in much the way that Shira was just talking about. So I think it's a blessing for us to get to be able to do this work every day. And now we will just jump in.
Yes, and so when they called and they said, we want to offer you this job at National Council of Jewish Women, would you like to work with the co-director? I didn't even know Glenn yet, and I said, absolutely. And now it's for the best team. So thank you again for having us. We all love someone who has had an abortion. This was first maybe said or coined by an amazing leader in the reproductive justice movement, Renee Bracey Sherman. But it's true. We all love someone who has had an abortion. And if you think you don't, what's more likely is that you don't know someone who yet has shared their abortion story with you. And so one thing we can do in the important cultural work that needs to happen is to become people where the people around you feel comfortable starting to share and open up their stories with you. So 24% of women in this country will have an abortion by age 45. That's 1 in 4. So this is an issue that affects, we all know someone who's had an abortion, and 1 in 4 people by age 45 will have had one. On this issue, in the fight for reproductive justice, we have to make the personal political. And because this isn't a political issue at all, it's a healthcare issue, it's an issue of bodily autonomy, dignity, and human rights. And so when we share our story, we reclaim the issue from those who seek to separate it from the lived reality of people in this country who have had abortions, and that's 1 in 4 people, 1 in 4 women. So, National Council of Jewish Women has worked on this, on reproductive health rights and justice since decades and decades, since maybe its founding in different ways. NCJW founded some of the earliest birth control centers in this country in the earliest 20th century. So we have been in the advocacy space working on this issue forever, and in recent years when we've seen the way the tide has been turning, the question was asked, well, how can we bring more of the Jewish community into this work? And so a lot of work was done to research what would it look like to have a campaign that's about mobilizing the Jewish community, and a lot of good questions were asked. So we want to begin maybe by asking you all, and it might be, we can run the mic, just to hear from a couple folks, like, why a Jewish movement for abortion access? Why might that be important in the narrative we're hearing around us? Any thoughts? Yeah. Will you say your name when you share?
Hi, thank you. My name is Lisa, and I'm a guest here from Nancy, who's a neighbor, and I appreciate this gathering on this particularly really important topic. I would suggest we need Jewish engagement on this topic because the Jewish approach to abortion is very different. The halachic considerations, as I understand them, and I am by no means an expert, put us in a very different place when we look at our Christian, particularly our Christian and our Catholic fellow citizens. I don't exactly know where Islam stands on, excuse me, on the issue of abortion, but I'm willing to bet that it's much closer to our position than it is to the Christian position. And so our voices are being, you made mention, and I promise I'll turn over the microphone. But
We should hire you.
but I do. This is something I'm super passionate about. I actually do think that the minority voices that have sort of taken over this conversation are doing a disservice to all of the women that we love and all the women that we don't know. And because our position is so important, and because anti-Semitism is a rising issue in this country, we need to make our voices known in sensible ways that are respectful and that demand the kinds of access to reproductive health that our young women and middle-aged women need.
Thank you, Lisa. Yeah,
Fantastic.
There's much we could say about why a Jewish movement, but I think what you're getting at there is there's a real opportunity to reclaim the narrative around an issue that has been politicized, but also has been framed as a religious issue, and one particular understanding of a particular Christian theology. And we'll say more in a little bit about what Judaism offers us, and we obviously have some real experts in the room that can say even more. All right. So I think the other thing we want to just say before we keep going is that we're living in a moment that we lost. Like, we're still in the aftermath of the Dobbs decision. We lost the constitutional right to abortion. And we really have to, we every day sit in that. Like, this is, we lost. This is a hard, challenging moment. And part of why building up a Jewish movement is to galvanize and figure out, well, what has to come next? What is the opportunity to build something that's completely different because what got us here didn't work? And we think, of course, the Jewish community could be powerful in offering something that might really swing this back in a way we absolutely need. And it's going to take all of us coming together, and it's going to take a generation. But we'll chip at it the way they chipped at it. All right. Oh yeah.
So, the Dobbs decision. We had Roe was ruled in 1973. Was a ruling in 1973 by the Supreme Court, and then last year in June, it was overturned. It was about a case in Mississippi. That little circle there is the actual clinic there, the Jackson Women's Health Organization that was at the center of all of this. It was the only clinic in Mississippi. The other piece to sort of remember around all of this is that it's really been the case for a lot of places across the country that they were living in a pre-Roe world already. Even when I started to do this work back in 1991, 90% of the counties in the nation did not have an abortion clinic. It's much worse now and getting worse. Now it's entire states, and several slides later you'll actually get you'll get a deeper picture of this. But it's important to remember that the world of the pre-Roe is really, post-Roe is really existed for many folks even before this last decision.
Let's see, does this work? Okay. So how did we get here? In 1973, and many of you could probably tell this story from living through it, but we'll do our best. So in 1973, after the Supreme Court affirmed the right to an abortion in Roe versus Wade, the religious right rolled up their sleeves and got to work. So over the next 50 years, we see wave of activism from the right, forced an anti-abortion, Christian-centric narrative into the political mainstream. These forced birth activists take a winner-takes-all, do everything approach to how to win this back, and really creative means to get what they want to do, to get it moving, including moving litigation through the courts, establishing like litmus tests for political candidates, working bills through state legislature, sometimes like very radical bills that they didn't think would get anywhere, and little by little they did, and creating a very hostile messaging environment that stigmatized abortion. So in 2011, following the 2010 census, we see extreme gerrymandering of state legislatures across the country, and this state legislation strategy takes center stage. So for about the past 10 years, anti-abortion politicians have advanced nearly 500 abortion restrictions through state legislatures, targeting patients seeking abortion, healthcare providers, and now with the bills like the SB 8 in Texas, and now copycat bills all over. We see bills going after people trying to help people get an abortion. So that is still being litigated, but that could be a social worker, an Uber driver, a supportive parent. You've all seen different headlines that I'm seeing too. So post-Roe, all of this is now copycat bills across state legislatures, and we're watching in real time as states are creating like surveillance programs. So I don't know if you all saw the news in Nebraska. There is a case where a teenager's messages with her mother are being used, being litigated about, did the mom help the daughter access an abortion? And so there's a lot of conversations happening around privacy and what's fair game for litigation. So this issue also, we have to be very clear that this issue affects anyone who is pregnant and anyone who ever wants to be pregnant. They're coming after IVF, fertilization, contraception, birth control, and I'm sure you've also all seen, there's many reports in the past few weeks about people in states that now have bans going to the ER because they're miscarrying and getting refusal of care without being able to prove, you have to go back and get it proved that this is a miscarriage before we're able to perform a DNC procedure. So this is not just something that affects people who want to have an abortion. This affects all pregnant people, anyone who ever will be pregnant or maybe doesn't want to get pregnant, because as we said, birth control is on the table too.
So this is a map from the middle of last year. It's actually not even still accurate now because things are changing so rapidly. The climate that that our opposition wanted to create is exactly this climate of uncertainty. And so what you see in this map, I'm going to sort of condense it down a little bit, is really the blue are states where it's actually protected and expanded and relatively safe. And then you'll notice that there's a lot of pink and a lot of orange. Those are sort of the abortion deserts. So folks will have to travel significant distances in order to arrive at places where they know it's actually safe and where they can actually obtain it. And then you throw in, the challenges around, travel for a parent that has, 2 other kids that they're trying to also keep in school or you throw in the fact that they can't actually get off from work, and you begin to get the picture of how difficult it is for somebody to actually obtain an abortion. And what it also winds up doing is sort of then pushing up the age at which people are actually getting their abortions, because they don't actually have the time off from work. They need to secure a babysitter. All of these different people, they don't have the money because the procedure in a different state is going to be more expensive. So it's difficult.
And it's not the most colorblind friendly map, I will acknowledge. So we'll work on that. I know I see my dad looking at me, but but Glenn said it. We have an abortion desert, and what did you tell me yesterday? That the Guttmacher is now saying we'll have 24 states where abortion is full legal by the end of the legislature.
There's 24 states where they expect it to be just sort of total bans or just straight up bans. And when I say total bans, it's sort of like 6 weeks and under, but there are some states where there are 15-week bans and other types of bans.
Okay.
The yellow is where it's somewhat protected.
So yeah, blue and yellow are where protected or like expanded access, where they're proactively trying to help people get access, like come here. So states where there's like, if there's a ban or a limit, a gestational limit, you'll see as like hostile.
Right. All right, so I spoke a little bit about this. You can imagine around the criminalization piece of abortion, you can imagine the communities that are going to be most impacted by this. If you are already, if you're a Black or a brown person, the policing in your community, you can see how these two pieces intersect. The folks that are going to have the most difficulty are the ones, low-income individuals, Black and Indigenous people, immigrants, folks who are having trouble using the. Slow down, Glenn. Pause. People with financial insecurities, they are going to be the ones that are most impacted by these bans and restrictions in general. And that's why we fight. One of the bright spots on the horizon, which is still also affected by those same restrictions, is medication abortion. So medication abortion is safe and effective. It's 2 pills that you take up to 10 weeks in pregnancy, misoprostol and mifepristone. It's fantastic. It allows an individual to actually, have an abortion on their own terms. But of course, the antis are also trying to, that is another area that is sort of the frontier at the moment where folks are actually trying to restrict it also. But it is something that is actually very promising. Again, we just saw the FDA last week, or maybe the week before, allow certified pharmacies and certified pharmacists to dispense it. So this is a good thing. We can be proud of that, be happy about that.
And we now know that over half of the abortions in this country are done through medication abortion.
Yeah.
About 54%, I think, was the recent number. Okay.
So abortion justice is really a term that our friends at All Above All coined, and it really is about, it sort of stems from the reproductive justice movement, and it's really what it says here. It's sort of a framework for achieving reproductive freedom that centers the experience of and focuses on removing the roadblocks for those who are the most impacted. And so it is a way of, it's actually the way that we try to approach doing this work, where we sort of look at, there's a later slide where we talk a little bit about our work in the courts, our work on voting, our work on sort of abortion. And in that center is sort of the justice that we're aiming for.
And I think the thing I want to stress about abortion justice as a framework is that part of what got us to the point where we lost is how the movement for too long left behind the people who are most impacted by these abortion bans, meaning that we weren't centering the like what Glenn was saying in Mississippi, like for too long, there was only one clinic in the entire state of Mississippi. So what was it like for people who needed to access abortion for decades in the state of Mississippi? Rural, poor, often Black, Southern states, without bringing like that experience front and center. That was part of how we lost.
I can give you a really interesting example of how abortion justice actually works. On one of the pages for accessing medication abortion, it's not ours, it's on a friend's a sister organization's website. They have a little tab that says, like, need to leave now, as if, and it's it's there because if you are in some place where somebody's watching over your shoulder and you need to tab out of that really quickly, it's there. And that kind of thinking is new. It's a different way of approaching things. It's not something that we have done as a movement before this, but that is exactly the kind of thinking that we need to have as we approach all of these pieces. I also think in this new abortion justice framework, we want to be more inclusive. We want to be able to bring the talents and skills of everyone to this movement. There is room for everyone to be moving this justice work forward.
So we're going to spend a little bit of time on language around how we talk about abortion. And first I want to say, we have some feedback for our comms folks on these slides. So first I just want to give a caveat. There is a say this, not that framework, which we're about to show. And I don't want to be in the business of policing anyone's language, so I don't love that framework. So instead I would suggest that on the one side, you're going to see how we historically have talked about this issue of abortion access and how we're encouraging us to begin speaking about it, to do the deep work of culture change that needs to happen, because what we were doing for so long wasn't working. And so suggesting that changing the way we talk about it, right? Language informs our world. Learned a lot about that here at Temple Micah. So that's my caveat for this slide. But I think you'll all probably agree before we get into this, like the language was never working, right? Like calling the opposition pro-life already assumed some sort of moral hierarchy, which is nonsense. It never existed. And this type. So from the get-go, the language, we had lost in some of the ways that we allowed the language around the issue to define the issue. So let's get into it. And in fact, I would say, like, we are pro-life. We center human dignity. Yeah, we center issues of human dignity. And so, like, let's not use that term at all, and we're not giving it to them. Okay. So, the early reproductive freedom movement's language of pro-choice, or my body, my choice, is changing. So in recent years, the movement's worked hard to evolve the way we speak about this, and choice-framed language can obscure exactly what Glenn was talking about, related issues of access, immigration, poverty, racism. These are all factors that can limit people's reproductive lives. So when we boil reproductive justice down to a matter of choice, we're flattening these other issues. You do not have a choice if you don't have access to choices. So instead of saying pro-choice, I often say I'm pro-abortion or I'm pro-abortion access. And similarly, I'll say that the opposition is anti-abortion or they're the forced birth movement, because language like pro-choice implies a moral superiority, which we cannot cede. So that's first. All right, next. There was a long period, I think it was the 90s, where people on our side of the issue, I would say safe, legal, and rare, that abortion should be safe, legal, and rare. Yes, the Clinton administration. So we have very much moved away from this. Words like rare stigmatize people who have had abortions and concede that abortion is not a normal part of medical care, when it's just the opposite. So qualifying and categorizing abortion this way in our messaging suggests that there can be reasonable limits to abortion, which has made it easier for forced birth state legislatures to engage in the work that it did. So today we say we're simply support abortion access. All right. So I'll often say abortion seekers and patients. I did say women during this talk, but I want to make sure it's clear that while this issue mostly impacts women, it does not only impact women. I'd be happy to speak much more about this, but this affects trans people, non-binary people, people who love someone who has a uterus. It affects all of us, and it's not just an issue that affects women. And so the last thing I'll say about language is we need to say the word abortion. If we say that we're pro-choice or that we're we support reproductive rights. We are keeping the word abortion in the shadows, and if we bring it out, we'll again be we'll be signaling to the world that we are proudly in support of abortion access and that we want people to share their abortion stories with us. Okay. I forgot.
This is sort of the frame for the next part of what we're going to be talking about. Abortion justice is a Jewish value. Support among Jews for abortion is extraordinarily high. 83%, that's like the truth is, to reach 83% in polling is rare. It's
Glenn said he doesn't think that the Dems poll 83% on abortion.
I don't even think they do.
Do you think they?
It's very, very, it's extraordinarily high. But on top of that, another piece to remember in all of this, so it's the highest among any other faith group, like Jews sort of have the highest support. And again, polling that high is actually rare to reach. Our campaign is seated within the reproductive health rights and justice movement. And we also know that we are part of, we belong with other faith organizations who also see this the same way. And we do this work not in spite of our beliefs, but because of them. We work in coalition with, Planned Parenthood's faith clergy. We work in coordination with the UUs. We work in coordination with Catholics. We've even done amicus briefs in the last several cases around abortion access. This is something that we as a community try to speak to the entire world as faith voices and as Jews about what it is that we believe. But our voices together are much more powerful. Oh, and as I don't remember your name. Lisa was saying earlier, it's really, really important to remember that it is a small and loud minority of Christian voices that are dominating this debate. Which is why I think our voices in the Jewish community are particularly important. This really is, abortion access really is about religious freedom. These ideas are rooted in Christian theology, they have a sense of when life actually begins that does not match Judaism's. It's extraordinarily problematic. And we know from the Constitution, you shall not make a law that.
I don't think we have it, but yeah, keep going.
Actually, I can't.
Yeah, so the religious freedom argument, First Amendment, all right, so we see this as both an violation of the Establishment Clause, right? There should not be laws that are imbued and have any Christian theology, any theology embedded in any laws, and a violation of free exercise because, and we'll say a little bit more about this, though I'll certainly welcome our rabbis in the room to say more, but Judaism is very clear that the life of the pregnant person takes precedent over the life of the fetus, and that abortion is permitted and sometimes even required if the life of the pregnant person is at risk. And so to violate, and we're not the only religious tradition, so this would affect, yeah, Muslims. We can't speak a lot.
And actually, they signed on to the amicus brief also. So the amicus brief that we had, that NCJW coordinated with Catholic for Choice and a bunch of other religious organizations, spelled out that essentially the idea of when life begins is not something that religions have unification on, that there's many, many different kinds of differences, and that the case that they were bringing forward, Jackson Women's Health, Dobbs, was problematic for all of these religions.
So obviously our current court wouldn't be so friendly to this argument. We are working with, we could say more about this in Q&A, but I'm sure you've heard about different religious freedom arguments that are being filed in different state legislatures. And it's something that we're looking into for this exact reason. What else? I can't see. I could welcome Rabbi Crawley or Rabbi Zemel to say a word about this, but I mean, I think what I'll say, and at different times it's been, what? You want to laugh? Yeah. All right, so. My dad. So we actually have coming up, and we'll tease this in a minute, but Repro Shabbat, which NCJW, we're in our third year, so every year we're looking for congregations to participate the week that we read the Torah portion, Mishpatim, which has these first verses in the book of Exodus, that is the first textual references to the status of the fetus. And so it's what I'll say is that we see it in Torah and in rabbinic literature, and there's many points along the map that you can point to where this issue is directly spoken to in Jewish tradition. That being said, core to who we are is pursuing justice, the widow, the orphan, the stranger, to be a voice for justice. And so this is what it means, we think, to be a voice for justice in the year 2023. This is, we see abortion justice as a Jewish value because we know abortion bans are marginalizing people most impacted in our society. So we're obligated to fight. Is this me?
Yeah, I mean, we can both do it.
Okay.
This is why we came together. This is why our campaign exists. This slide talks, this is actually the rally that we had in May of last year.
Right?
Yeah, May of last year, where we brought over 4,000.
Temple Micah turned out in droves. It was awesome.
Yes. So did Temple Emmanuel. Well, not in droves, but we had a few. But it really is us. We see ourselves bringing the Jewish community's voice together. It involves education. It involves advocacy. It involves direct service. The way it's actually organized, we want to bring these voices into the public sphere. We want to change the narrative around these pieces, around how abortion, how reproductive health and rights are talked about. And we want to make sure that it's understood that we have a space at this table.
So there's a few, we're going to get now into just a few minutes of how we have acted and ways for everyone here to plug in. So we knew that with the loss of Roe, one of the areas of greatest need was going to be the funding for abortion. As we've said, abortion was inaccessible for too many people for way too long, and the costs were about to skyrocket because at a certain point, it's one thing not to be able to afford the abortion care, but now if you have to travel and you need childcare and time off from work, the cost for abortion was about to skyrocket. So we launched in May, in anticipation of the decision, the Jewish Fund for Abortion Access, which is in partnership with National Abortion Federation, and the money that the Jewish community were about to be able to announce. We're getting there. We're inching in on $1 million raised by the Jewish community, and all of that money has gone to directly support patients seeking care, specifically around their travel costs. So one thing people ask all the time, what is something you can do right now? We're all in DC, get connected with DCAF, that is the local abortion fund here in DC. There's a fund in Northern Virginia I'm happy to tell you about, ARCH, but there's local abortion funds need your money to fund abortion. And we also have this fund, which funds patients all over the country.
It was one of the most compelling pieces for the both of us, even before we had started, to see that NCJW had really committed. It's really putting our mouth where our money where our mouth is, really raising dollars for those who needed it. So I was at Planned Parenthood, I believe, when I saw NCJW pull together the Rabbis for Repro program and thought, wow, this is truly amazing. And since then, it's actually only grown. And again, it's Rabbis for Repro, but it actually is more inclusive. It includes cantors and maharat and other Jewish clergy and educators. It is a network of folks who preach and teach about what the meaning of what Judaism's stance is around abortion. It's fantastic and it's growing. We even have, in our latest piece, we are working with emerging clergy, which is really exciting, and involving them in our this year's Repro Shabbat. And yeah.
Very proud that all of Temple's Micah's clergy are part of the Rabbis for Repro network. Yep. All right, and then a lot of the work we're doing right now is around culture change. I put this photo here. I don't know if you can see it, but this is a photo my mom sent me on her walk. I don't even know the person who lives here, who has this amazing sign that you can't see that says abortion bans are against our religion. But we really think that, yes, you too can have the sign. And in fact, we brought bumper magnets and stickers and buttons, so please feel free to take, but you can get yard signs. This is important. We believe that there's important cultural work to do, and part of that is like giving people the opportunity to reclaim the narrative in the public square or in your front yard, to make it very clear that abortion bans are against our religion and that people in this house support reproductive freedom. So a lot of that work is happening, and Temple Micah put up the banner before we had a chance to even send the banner, but there's banners in congregations all over the country, and you should be proud you have your own.
I just went up when I meant to go.
Yeah, okay, so this is just fun because this just happened, and I was like amazed how it was awesome. I just have to give a shout out to Rabbi Bra on the back. So, all right, so I said Repro Shabbat's coming up February 17th to 18th, which is this year, the week that we're reading Parshat Mishpatim. And so that's this year, the weekend that congregations, communities across the country are going to honor Repro Shabbat. On Sunday, I went to Bowling B'Yachad. It was great. Hope to see you there next year. And Josh was like, oh, you should meet this great new member, Dr. Carolyn Suffren. You guys have similar interests. So I got to talking to her. She's fantastic. She's an abortion provider at Hopkins, and her work intersects with abortion care and incarceration. And she's fantastic. Shout out to her. And we are very lucky that she will be Temple Micah's Repro Shabbat speaker, so I hope you all will be part of Repro Shabbat. And yeah, work amazingly fast. It was incredible. And what else I want to say? Oh, so this is part of like long culture change, right? This isn't just like one synagogue, one place doing Repro Shabbat, congregations across the country. And this year we also are having a Repro Shabbat at home piece. So if you aren't able to come to the temple, or in addition to coming to the temple, or if you're on Zoom, we have a resource for you to bring into your own home around your Shabbat dinner table. You'll be able to find us on JewsForAbortionAccess.org or ReproShabbat.org.
So, as a person who's done advocacy and policy, we would be remiss if we didn't give you a few things to do. But the reality is there's a lot of different on-ramps, including like it really just even saying the word abortion and having conversations about it, bringing it up with your friends, bringing it up, if you wear your Jews for Abortion Access shirt, somebody may stop you in the supermarket and then have a conversation with them. All of that helps to destigmatize this. It is just a medical procedure. The fact that it has taken on such political angst is really a function of the opposition's stigmatizing it, really. As Shira said, join Temple Micah for Repro Shabbat.
They're all so important. They're all number one. James on it. I was like, wow, 1, 2, 3.
Oh, the bulleting in PowerPoint.
They're all, no.
They're all.
It was a formatting issue. Sorry. Yep.
And then lastly, sort of thanking your local abortion providers. for the important services that they provide. They are under fire. It's a very difficult time for them. They are taking on, in places where it's legal, like Maryland, they are taking on patients from all over. And so a little thank you goes a really long way. And so just, we actually have some wonderful kits on our site where you can print them out, little postcard, really quick. Thanks for the work that you're doing. We care about you. You all know how it feels to get a nice thank you note.
I think we'll move into Q&A.
We're going to have a Q&A, but I'm going to take the privilege of asking whether, in considering the proper language for this subject, you ever considered pro-life with choice? Little jujitsu. Anyway, questions? He's not. Somebody have a question? Somebody not named Zemel.
I do have a question. Is there any discussion in your office about, just a few days ago, last week, the New York Times had a whole thing about when does life begin? I found the article extremely disturbing, personally. Is there any discussion in your office about whether this kind of approach is helpful or not, and how you respond to that? Because it seems that that question is immediately injected into the discussion you're trying to have, and I'm wondering how you respond to it and how you discuss it in the office.
No, it's a good question. I mean, I think
Share a mic with him.
I think the question of when, I think the reason why the Supreme Court actually ruled the way it did in Roe was in part to avoid the question of answering the question of when life actually begins, because we know that religions don't actually agree upon that. And it's problematic to encode any one religion's view, and that is exactly where a bunch of the laws use as a starting place. There's a bill that's going to be introduced, it may already have been introduced today, that actually specifies life begins at conception. That is incredibly problematic. That's absolutely a violation of the First Amendment. So I think we talk about it indirectly.
Okay, well, it's funny that Barbara said that because, there's this amazing comedian, Allison Leiby, who does this stand-up show, Oh God, a show about abortion, about her own abortion story, and she's become a friend of ours. Well, I want to say she's a friend. If you're watching, Allison. But she has a great joke that life begins when the proud couple posts the photo on Instagram with the baby. That's when life begins, when the baby's debuted on social media, which I don't know if that lands with this group, but that's what people do now. I did it. I don't know if my sister will, but I think if what you're asking is exactly what Glenn says, it's totally problematic that the New York Times would even report on that. It is completely biased. It's assuming that that's a conversation that should be in the water at all. Doctors don't agree on this, and it continues to put the stigmatization and the bias in the water around the issue. Does that answer the question? Do you have more you want to say? Okay.
You have a question from our Zoom audience.
Okay, great. I'll also say at any point, our really smart colleagues can also chime in, we have other fun office conversations, not always about abortion.
Jerry?
Okay. Hi, this is Jerry, for those of you at home. First of all, David, I think Rabbi Zemel asked your question, or answered it for you. So the next question I have here is from Kate Kiggins, and it says, what is your opinion of the National Abortion Federation Hotline Fund?
We have, so our fund, the Jewish Fund for Abortion Access, is in partnership with the National Abortion Federation Hotline Fund. Glenn should speak more because, Glenn, what was your first job in the movement?
My first internship in the movement was actually at the National Abortion Federation Hotline. And basically they have case managers that connect individuals who are looking for services, looking to sort of navigate the entire, morass of state laws. They help people with travel. They help people get the access to the care they need. And that is what our fund actually was set up to do, to help these patients get to travel to where they need to.
And I'll just say one other thing about abortion funding, I think that maybe is related to the question. So what I've learned is also that most patients who need abortions, who need financial support for their abortion care, are receiving like a patchwork of funding to be able to afford the care. And many patients nationally, like NAF is, all the clinics sort of send patients to the NAF hotline, see if you can get some money from NAF, and then NAF can help direct you to local funds. The fund Arch that I work with does like the gap funding, like those last like $75, $80 people need to be able to access care. And then the hotline has really amped up since SB 8 to be able to provide travel funding.
Yeah, so the answer to that question in some ways is both, find your local abortion funds and NAF also.
Other questions?
This is Karen Rosenbaum. I'd like to ask a question about the theological aspects, because I have had arguments with Jews who tell me things like abortion is murder. And I would like to have an argument based in Jewish teaching that I can respond.
We're going to defer to our rabbi, President Rabbi.
The reason, this is clearly a long answer, but they've never read the verse in chapter 21 of Exodus, which more or less specifically says that abortion is not murder, okay? So it almost could not be. I mean, you could write these verses down, chapter 21, verses 22 to 25, which is from the opening section of Mishpatim. Mishpatim is the first set of laws in the book of Exodus that immediately follow the giving of the Ten Commandments. Okay, so
the story is
Mishpatim means laws.
it's Exodus 21.
Okay,
yeah.
so here
You have to tell the story in the context.
I'm
It's
going
two people
I'm going to read it because my other daughter that's here, Ronit, the
pulled
older
up,
sister,
pulled up Pocket Torah.
has the ability to do this, which is simply also remarkable. I have two remarkable daughters here.
It's true.
This is chapter 21, verse 22, just what's there. When men strive together and hit a pregnant woman, so that her children come out, but there is no harm, the one who hit her shall surely be fined, as the woman's husband shall impose on him, and he shall pay as the judges determine. Every single ounce of Jewish commentary on this since day one, when this was written over 2,000 years ago, shows that this means the ending of the life of a fetus is not murder. It is explicitly not murder, because right before this, there are the penalties for murder. And this example is coming to show that this is not murder. This is not the equivalent of ending a life. And then all subsequent Jewish law, the most recent long piece on this, a book-length piece, if you want to read the book by the former British chief rabbi, an Orthodox rabbi in London, Emanuel Jakubowicz, who was a world-class halachist. His book, Jewish Medical Ethics, goes into this extensively. I'll stop talking now, I'm sorry.
The verse is saying that if two people fight and a miscarriage ensues, that the person who caused the miscarriage has to pay a fine. But then it goes on to say, if two people fight and the pregnant person dies, the punishment is life for life. So there we see very clear pregnant, yeah, exactly what you said, Rabbi.
In the interest of following your advice to personalize and tell our stories, I have a question. How would you respond to my family, something that happened to my family that I've never shared outside my family? In 1940, my mother's older sister became pregnant. She did not want the child. She was not married. And she had a back alley abortion, lost the ability to conceive as a result. How do we tell that kind of story in today's context, given that I believe similar things are likely to happen? Where's pro-life in this story?
Thank you for sharing that. I think we are working with the Jewish, I'm gonna let Shira talk a little bit more about this, but we're working with the Jewish Women's Archive to surface,
Glenn, could you
Jewish
speak up?
Women's Archive to surface exactly those kinds of stories, the reproductive health stories of individuals, and sad ones also, in part because there's actually a deficit of Jewish stories around reproductive health and rights, and we know Jews actually access abortion or try to, and have tried to for years. So building up the library of stories, storytelling is a powerful way of convincing people and helping people understand.
Yeah, and I think, you know, yeah, I want to thank you for sharing that story, and I want to get you connected with the Jewish Women's Archive. And if you're asking, like, there is a narrative out there, obviously from the opposition, that abortion's not safe, that it can, you know, things have changed a lot since in medical care, and these are very safe procedures. Medication abortion safer than Tylenol, and that doesn't mean, and we have to continue to, we have to expand abortion access so people aren't forced into unsafe situations. Thank you for sharing.
Jerry has a question from home.
Okay, I first have one comment. I'm going to take a personal privilege. I just wish that there was more highlighting of who's getting abortions. I was having a talk the other day with a person, and it was still the idea that it's because people are engaging in free sex and then they get pregnant. And I mean, I was very moved in Texas, the stories about Texas of women whose babies had been declared dead, or not babies, fetuses had been declared dead before they were born, and the doctors were afraid to give them an abortion. You know, and all kinds of reasons that women seek abortions, and that it's not just, you know, those of us running around in the streets having free sex. But I just,
Yeah, thank you.
I just wish there were more.
Well, I just want to say over 60% of people who have abortions are already parents.
Yeah.
So that statistic right there tells us something about who is getting
Yes.
abortions in this country and around compounding issues of access.
But in the meantime, I
Yes.
have a question from Mindy Reiser. It would be useful to discuss the international dimensions of the legislation outlawing and criminalizing abortions in other countries. El Salvador, for example, imprisons women who have miscarriages. The Christian right is linking up with allies across the world to enlist them against access to abortion.
We have my cousin Barbara here as an expert in abortion access in Peru. No, I'm just kidding. I was just trying to punt because I don't know. Here, Glenn, go.
Yes, and also, interestingly, I think you can point to examples across the world where countries are actually being more progressive than the United States. I mean, you think about Ireland, you think about, is it Argentina? I think there are a number of countries that are sort of moving the laws in the right direction, and then certainly ours, which is moving it in the wrong. It is, but the second part of that question is we do actually absolutely export our anti-abortion, anti-reproductive justice, anti-reproductive health rights and to other countries, and that movement is connected across seas, and it is extraordinarily problematic.
I guess I have multiple questions. One is, what is your relationship to organizations around the country like JACPAC in Chicago and other groups who are focused on women's rights, in addition to Israel, whatever, they have that dual? So that's one question. The other is, what are you doing about, are there panels that go around to temples or to churches with a range of either Jewish range or multiple religion range to talk to groups? Like when I was back in the 50s in school, I was on a panel of Americans about religions, and of course, being the Jewish person, now you're into several different issues, but it's a similar kind of thing. How do you make it like public conversation and get people to see other people who look just like you, who are
Yeah, it's a great question. Thank you.
and I can go on.
Okay, so I'll take the first one. I think also NCJW is well positioned because in that it's in its relationships, both in the like secular reproductive health rights and justice movement, sitting at all those tables, and in the Jewish tables. I don't need to tell Temple Micah, like the Jewish social justice world is exploding. There's, every issue has an organization. We work with all of them. And I think part of the challenge for the Jewish community is that we care about every single issue that matters, and the opposition doesn't. They're like much more narrowly focused because they know that taking away people's freedom, autonomy, like then you can go on to the next thing that takes away people's autonomy and freedom. So yeah, we work. Glenn leads the Jewish Abortion Access Coalition, that it's like every major national Jewish organization is a part of, to help help organizations where maybe doesn't have abortion access like front and center as their core issue the way we do, how to elevate that, how to bring in like intersecting issues of immigration, perhaps if you work at HIAS around obviously people who refugees, immigrants, like compounding access to abortion. So that is a lot of the work, is working with our Jewish partners. And then to your next question, that's exactly why NCJW launched Rabbis for Repro, Jewish Clergy for Repro. There's like no better way to get these conversations like out in all over the country than like deputizing, a network that's all over the country of clergy and also educators and Jewish professionals to be able to like seed these conversations. And NCJW is very active locally. We have sections all over the country that also do these types of panels. And we have like a great local action team that's led out in Maryland, but they're doing work in DC as well that I could connect folks to.
I have a quick.
Use the mic and give your name, please.
Debbie Berg. Okay. I have a quick medical question about the medical abortion pill. You said 54% use it. Don't these people have to have DNCs after they use that pill?
Generally, no.
No?
Yeah.
Okay.
No.
Because that was I thought my understanding was that they sometimes did, and then they had difficulty with the follow-up on that.
No, I'm not a doctor, and I'm not even playing one on TV. But no, generally that is not the case. The second of the two pills, and I'm not necessarily in my head remembering which one's first and which one's second at the moment, but the second of the ones sort of helps pass the, yeah. Right.
So we're in the self-managed abortion coalitions, and I think the change of like gestational age of when you can take medication abortion is, you can take it at like any point in pregnancy, but at the point where like there could be more, is there a doctor here? There's a point that there could be more complications.
Right. The United States sort of does it to 10 weeks, but I think the World Health Organization actually, you can do it a few more weeks after that.
And that's in part because like at what point would like a surgical procedure have to become involved if they weren't able to pass the fetus at home?
See, Harriet, how much time do we have? All right.
My nemesis, the microphone. I just want to thank both of you for your inclusive language. Both, in your speaking extempore and in your presentation materials, because it's important to acknowledge that not everyone who gets pregnant and will deal with this stuff is a woman.
Exactly.
And I have a 13-year-old with a uterus, and hi, I'm terrified, please send help. But it makes people so much more willing to listen when you include them. And I just really appreciate you so much.
Question?
My name is Roberta Gorin, and actually I was going to say pretty much what Janelle said, but with one additional thing. The term abortion access makes it so much better because in my head, no one is in favor of abortion. Nobody thinks, oh yeah, let's go out and do that. But abortion access is something that everybody needs, and it seems so logical to support that I thank you for awakening me to this new term for me, and it's wonderful, and thank you for your presentation.
Thank you. I think
Jean Steckler. I just wanted to share something that I listened to recently on NPR. There's a 5-part series on the evangelical radio, national stations. And apparently, the initial thrust of the evangelical movement was to segregate schools. They didn't want desegregation. They couldn't get they were ambivalent about abortion rights. They didn't care. It was not their issue. It was the Catholic issue. They didn't identify with that as an issue. They couldn't get traction on segregation. So in order to pull in a larger listening audience, they adopted the abortion issue, and they have gotten lots of traction on that. Doesn't mean they haven't given up their original goal.
No, but I think your point is so spot on that its roots are in a different place. And that's where the intersections, that's where the abortion justice, that's where the elements of anti-Semitism, like all of these things sort of intersect in similar places.
One of the country's experts on the rise of Christian nationalism is speaking at Temple Micah on Sunday afternoon, February 12th, Diana Butler-Bass. Be sure to mark that. She's been here before. She's remarkable. February 12th, 4:30 in the afternoon.
Kenny, give your name.
Ken Lieberstein, and thank you both for coming. I was curious if you could speak a little bit about ballot initiatives that are, that are sort of surfacing in different states, and how you think that might change the map that you put up on the projector earlier.
So the funny thing is, we've had really good work with ballot initiatives. So in the last election, we won on all 6, I believe, in Vermont, Michigan, Kentucky, California. Kansas had one. So it's very interesting that when it's actually put to the people, all of the polls actually seem to bear out that people really do support abortion access. And so I think this is sort of me prognosticating, I suspect we may see some more proactive ballot initiatives in places where they might be able to secure it moving forward. But the truth is, even on ballots, even before this last election, our success rate was high. I remember I worked on the ballot in Mississippi where they were trying to institute personhood, and you would think that would actually have won, and we beat it soundly. We trounced it, which was a bit of a surprise, but what it required was us actually talking to people at length about sort of what it actually would mean and what it would do. So it's a really great question, and I think it'll be interesting to see what happens, because I think, yeah, and actually, yes, that's right. We worked to bring the Jewish community actually together to call in on a bunch of those ballots in a bunch of different states. Thank you.